Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really diving headfirst into something critical for anyone in financial risk management. The sheer scale of cyber threats.
It's honestly staggering.
It is. The projection is what, USD 10.5 trillion in cybercrime costs by 2025?
That's the number, and it's more than triple what it was back in 2015. Just incredible growth.
And think about the data breaches. Nearly 5 billion records exposed just in U.S.-listed firms between 2005 and 2023.
Yeah, and these aren't, simple attacks anymore. We're seeing nation-states, very sophisticated criminal groups involved.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to try and unpack the regulatory side of things in the EU and the U.S. It's complex, often feels fragmented.
Very fragmented, especially stateside.
Right. We're looking at data privacy, cybersecurity, operational risk, all crucial for you as a risk manager. Because understanding this isn't just about compliance, is it? It's fundamental to operational integrity, managing costs.
And the reputational damage, that's huge.
Absolutely. Reputational harm can be crippling.
And the paper we're sort of basing this on, it really hammers home how complex, heterogeneous, and incomplete this landscape is.
That phrase captures it perfectly.
It does. And for risk managers, that complexity translates directly into challenges. Rising costs from damaged data, lost productivity, that reputational hit we mentioned, it all adds up.
So that's the core challenge. For this deep dive, let's try to tackle some key questions. What are the big differences between the EU and US approaches?
Yeah, where are the gaps? What's missing?
And maybe most importantly, what does it all mean for you, listening in, trying to navigate this? How do you build real resilience?
Good questions. Let's start with the EU.
Okay. The EU often seems more coherent, I suppose, especially starting with data privacy. GDPR is the big one there, right?
Absolutely. GDPR is the cornerstone, General Data Protection Regulation, and its reach is, well, famously wide, extraterritorial.
Meaning it doesn't matter where your company is based. If you handle data of EU citizens,
you're covered. You have to comply, period.
And for banks, insurance companies, what are the key GDPR requirements they really need to focus on?
Well, several core principles. Explicit consent is a big one. You need clear permission to process data.
Right.
Then there's privacy by design, baking privacy into your systems from the start.
Not just bolting it on later.
Exactly. And critically, mandatory data breach notification. You've got 72 hours to tell your data protection authority, your DPA.
72 hours, that's tight.
It is. And you also have to notify the individuals affected if there's a high risk to them.
And the penalties. They're not trivial.
Oh, definitely not. We're talking up to 20 million euros or 4% of your global annual turnover, whichever is higher.
4% of global turnover. Wow.
Yeah, look at the big fines. Amazon, what was it, 746 million?
Huge. And Instagram got hit hard too, 405 million.
So yeah, these regulations have serious teeth. This shows the real-world impact.
Absolutely. You mentioned privacy by design. Beyond just avoiding those massive fines, what's the biggest operational shift you think financial institutions have faced because of that principle?
That's a great point. It really forces a fundamental shift in thinking. It's not just a compliance exercise.
Right.
It means embedding data protection considerations into the entire life cycle. Product development, service design, everything.
So thinking about data minimization, pseudonymization.
Exactly. Secure by default settings. It requires more upfront investment, definitely, in how you architect systems and processes. It's a different way of operating for many financial firms.
Okay, so GDPR sets the privacy foundation. Then the EU moved on to network and information security with the NIS directive.
Right, NIS 1 initially.
And now we have NIS 2 directive 2022-2555. And the deadline for that is coming up fast, October 2024.
Correct. You need to be ready.
And this isn't just a minor update, is it? The scope seems much broader.
Oh, significantly broader. NIS 1 focused mainly on operators of essential services, think core banking, financial market infrastructure. NIS 2 expands that dramatically. It pulls in more sectors, more types of entities.
Why is that expansion so important for financial institutions specifically? What changes?
Well, it imposes stricter cybersecurity risk management duties, more detailed incident reporting obligations, and it applies to a wider range of players in the financial ecosystem.
Okay.
Plus, NIS 2 aims to harmonize things across the EU. Consistent supervision, consistent enforcement powers.
And penalties here too.
Yes, up to 10 million or 2% of global annual turnover.
So another significant financial risk.
Definitely. And this raises a really critical issue for risk managers, the potential for double jeopardy.
Meaning getting hit under both GDPR and NIS2 for the same incident.
Potentially, yes. They're designed to be complementary. But a single cyber incident, a data breach perhaps, could trigger investigations and sanctions under both regimes.
Wow. So a single mistake could lead to cumulative fines.
It could double your legal and financial exposure. It really underscores the need for an incident response plan that considers both frameworks simultaneously. It's not just a theoretical worry.
That's a major headache for risk planning. Now, the EU also has institutions to back this up, right? Like ENISA?
Yes, ENISA, the EU Agency for Cybersecurity. It got a permanent mandate with the Cybersecurity Act in 2019.
And its role is what? Coordination? Standards?
Yeah, both, really. Strengthening operational collaboration between member states and developing EU-wide cybersecurity certification schemes.
Like the EUCC scheme for ICT products that started this year.
Exactly. That's one example. Effective January 2024.
Okay, so general cybersecurity is covered by NIS2, privacy by GDPR.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the EU also specifically targets operational resilience in finance.
Yes, and that's where DORA comes in, the Digital Operational Resilience Act.
DORA. Okay, another acronym to know.
Chuckles.
Yeah.
Yes, EU loves its acronyms. DORA is EU 2022-2554, and it applies from January 2025.
So very soon.
Very soon. And it's crucial. It requires all financial institutions, banks, insurers, investment firms, you name it, to ensure they can withstand, prevent, and recover from ICT disruptions.
So it's about ensuring the systems keep running, essentially.
Pretty much. It's very comprehensive. Covers ICT risk management, how you classify and report incidents, mandatory digital operational resilience testing.
Like penetration testing.
That and more advanced threat-led penetration testing for significant institutions. And critically, it covers third-party ICT risk, your vendors, your cloud providers.
The supply chain risk, that's huge.
Absolutely. And a key thing for risk managers, DORA brings in unified oversight by the European supervisory authorities, the ESAs.
So the ECB, EBA, ESME, IPA, the big financial regulators?
Exactly. The aim is to eliminate the fragmentation we saw previously with national supervisors having slightly different rules or approaches, more consistency.
Makes sense. Are there other big EU initiatives financial firms should have on their radar?
Yeah, a few are still developing but will be important. There's the Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA.
What's that about?
It mandates secure by design principles for manufacturers of digital products, software, hardware. That applies from late 2027.
So shifting responsibility upstream to the vendors.
Partially, yes. Then there's the Data Act, or DA, applicable September 2025. That focuses on data access and portability, especially for IoT data, but it naturally requires strong security controls.
Okay.
And the Digital Markets Act, DMA, which already applies to the big gatekeeper platforms, promotes fair competition but also reinforces data protection rules.
So quite a dense, interconnected web of regulations in the EU. Seems like they're trying to cover all the angles.
They are. It's complex, but there's a definite logic and coherence driving it.
All right, let's shift gears and cross the Atlantic. The U.S. regulatory landscape. You mentioned earlier it's different.
Yeah. That's an understatement. The contrast is pretty stark.
How so?
Well, fundamentally, the U.S. lacks that single comprehensive federal law for either data privacy or general cybersecurity like the EU has with GDPR or NIS2.
So instead of one rule book.
You get a patchwork, as the paper calls it. It's a mix of state-level laws, industry-specific regulations, and some federal agency oversight.
A patchwork? That sounds challenging for compliance.
It absolutely is. Like trying to navigate a maze where the walls keep changing depending on which state you're in or which sector you operate in.
Are there any federal anchors, though?
Oh, sure. There are important federal players. CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is key.
Part of Homeland Security.
Yep. They provide tools, analysis, warnings, especially for critical infrastructure sectors, including finance.
All right.
And there's the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, also called CISA, confusingly from 2015. That encourages companies to voluntarily share cyber threat info with the government, offering some liability protection if they do.
Voluntary being the key word there.
Often, yes, which contrasts with the mandatory nature of much EU regulation.
Now, you mentioned state laws. Yeah. Data privacy seems like a prime example of this fragmentation in the U.S.
It's probably the best example. Data protection, breach notification, it's largely left to individual states.
And they all do it differently.
Wildly differently sometimes. You get huge variation in, say, how a data breach is even defined, or what triggers a notification requirement, the reporting thresholds, who enforces the rules, what the penalties are, even who the law applies to it can all change state by state.
Can you give an example?
Well, California is the famous one, right? With the CCPA, now CPRA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. It's quite strict, inspired somewhat by GDPR.
Okay.
But then you look at penalties in other states. Michigan might have fines over $500 for certain violations, while South Carolina might cap penalties at $1,000 for others. It's all over the map.
That sounds like a compliance nightmare, especially for a national financial institution.
It's a massive headache, keeping track of 50 different sets of rules, potentially.
And does this fragmentation affect how companies handle breaches?
Yeah.
Beyond just compliance, like litigation risk?
Absolutely. The paper points out that firms often underreport incidents. Part of that is this patchy mandatory disclosure framework. It's inconsistent.
And they're worried about lawsuits and reputation.
Exactly. But when big breaches do come to light, the litigation risk is enormous. Class action lawsuits are common.
We've seen some huge settlements, haven't we?
Definitely. Equifax is a prime example. That initial settlement fund was $380 million. But the total cost, including credit monitoring, could be closer to $2 billion.
Wow.
Capital One settled for $190 million after their big breach.
And I remember reading about that Capital One case. Didn't it highlight something about the NIST framework?
Yes. Interestingly, analysis suggested that if Capital One had fully implemented the NIST's cybersecurity framework, which is a widely respected voluntary standard in the U.S., the breach might have been prevented or mitigated.
So even the voluntary standards are seen as best practice, but they're not universally mandated.
Precisely. And this ties back to what the paper calls the underinvestment problem in cybersecurity.
Explain that a bit.
Well, the idea is that the benefit of one company investing heavily in security often spills over to others. It makes the whole system safer. That's a positive externality or social value. Yeah. But the individual company might only consider its private value, protecting its own assets and reputation. Because they don't capture that full social value, they might invest less than what's optimal for society as a whole. There can be a free rider issue, too.
Right, hoping others bear the cost of security.
Kind of. And that's why strong, clear, mandatory disclosure rules are seen as so important. They force transparency.
Making the risks visible.
Exactly. Visible to investors, customers, regulators, everyone. That creates pressure and accountability, incentivizing better investment in security because the potential costs of not investing become much clearer.
Okay, that makes sense. So while there's no single federal law, which federal agencies are trying to improve things, especially for financial firms, the SEC comes to mind.
Yes, the SEC is a major player, especially with its new cybersecurity disclosure rule, adopted in July 2023. This is a big deal for publicly traded financial institutions.
What does that rule change?
Two main things. First, faster incident reporting. Item 1.05 on Form 8K now requires companies to disclose material cybersecurity incidents.
Material incidents.
Yes, and they have to do it within 4 business days of determining the incident is material. Not 4 days from discovery, but from determining materiality, which gives a little wiggle room, but it's still fast.
4 business days. And what do they have to disclose?
The nature, scope, and impact, or reasonably likely impact of the incident.
Okay, that's the incident reporting. What's the second part?
The second part is about ongoing governance and risk management. Item 106 of Regulation SK, filed annually on Form 10K.
So in the annual report.
Right. Companies now have to describe their processes for assessing and managing cybersecurity risks, their overall strategy, and crucially, the governance structure.
Meaning who's in charge? Board oversight.
Exactly. They need to detail the board's oversight role regarding cyber risk and management's role and expertise in assessing and managing that risk.
So the goal here is really tackling that under-disclosure problem you mentioned.
Precisely. More timely information on incidents, more consistent information on how companies are managing the risk proactively. It's a big step for investor protection and market understanding of these risks.
Beyond the SEC, what other sector-specific rules should financial risk managers know about in the U.S.?
Well, for financial institutions specifically, there's the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, from way back in 1999. It has safeguards rules for protecting customer financial information.
Oh, GLBA.
And if you handle credit cards, you absolutely have to comply with PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. That's technically an industrial standard, not a law, but non-compliance has huge consequences.
Right, the card brands enforce that one.
They do. And then slightly outside pure finance, but often relevant due to links with health savings accounts or insurance, there's 𝗍𝗶𝗶𝗏.
Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. for patient data.
Exactly. Protecting sensitive health information, PHI. And 𝗏𝗚𝗏 is getting some important updates relevant now, late 2024.
What kind of updates?
The 𝗏𝗏𝗏 rule is being enhanced with more specific mandatory safeguards. Things like requiring multi-factor authentication, MFA.
Okay, MFA becoming mandatory there.
Yes. Also encryption for electronic PHI, better audit logs, and requirements for continuous vulnerability management. And penalties are steep, up to $1.5 million per violation type per year.
That's significant. And any state-level rules that are particularly noteworthy for finance?
The big one is often cited as the New York Department of Financial Services, the NYDFS Cybersecurity Regulation Part 500.
Ah, yes. New York's rules are known for being tough.
They are often seen as a benchmark, and they were updated again in November 2023, enhancing governance requirements, mandating regular audits, stricter access controls, things like that. Many see it as a model other states might follow.
So even within the U.S. patchwork, some states are setting a high bar.
Definitely. And we should also quickly mention CERCIE, the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act from March 2022.
What does that do?
It mandates reporting of significant cyber incidents and any ransomware payments to CISA, specifically for entities defined as critical infrastructure. Finance is definitely in that category.
So more mandatory reporting, but specific to critical infrastructure.
Right. And looking further ahead, there's even legislation like the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act from late 2023.
Preparing for quantum code breaking.
Essentially, yes. Getting federal agencies ready for the transition to quantum-resistant cryptography. So the U.S. is looking at future threats, even if the current regulatory landscape is complex.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in both the EU and the U.S. Let's try to sort of summarize the core differences.
Yeah, the contrast is pretty clear, isn't it?
It seems the EU really prioritizes legal coherence, this comprehensive approach. You've got GDPR for privacy, NIS2 for security, DORA for operational resilience, all with broad, often extraterritorial reach.
Right. It's a top-down, harmonized system, generally speaking.
Whereas the U.S., it's that fragmented, sector-specific, often voluntary approach. Heavy reliance on state laws, industry standards like NIST, specific agency rules like the SEC's.
Exactly. The EU asks, are you compliant with the framework? The U.S. often asks, are you compliant with California law, New York law, 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏, SEC rules, and following NIST best practices?
A very different set of questions for a risk manager.
Very different compliance burden, especially for firms operating in both regions.
But despite these different paths, you mentioned a shared limitation earlier, something about disclosure.
Yes. The paper argues strongly that mandatory disclosure rules for data breaches and privacy violations are still insufficient in both the EU and the US.
Really, even with GDPR's 72-hour rule and the SEC's 4-day rule.
Well, those are steps, but challenges remain. Underreporting is still suspected to be significant. Definitions of materiality or high risk can be interpreted differently. And there isn't really a single centralized, standardized public repository for breach information in either jurisdiction that captures everything comprehensively.
I see. So it's hard to get a full picture of systemic risk.
Exactly. It limits the ability of regulators, investors, and other financial institutions to truly assess the overall level of cyber risk in the system. And it weakens market discipline, that pressure we talked about.
And this links back to the underinvestment problem you described.
Directly. If the true frequency and cost of breaches aren't fully visible due to patchy disclosure, it's harder to make the business case for optimal security investments. Stronger, standardized, centralized disclosure is seen as a key mechanism to align private incentives with the broader social need for cybersecurity.
Makes sense. So both regions are definitely evolving, making progress.
Absolutely. Things are moving fast. NIS2, DORA, the SEC rules, HIPPO updates, these are all recent or upcoming changes.
But the core challenge remains for you, the risk manager, particularly in international firms. It's navigating this complex, constantly shifting, and sometimes inconsistent regulatory environment.
That's the job, isn't it? Trying to ensure your institution isn't just ticking compliance boxes, but is genuinely building operational resilience against these threats.
It really is.
And looking ahead, this complexity raises a really important strategic question, I think. As our digital economies get even more tangled up globally, what concrete steps can financial institutions actually take to bridge these gaps? How do you build truly resilient operations that go beyond just reacting to the latest compliance mandate from Brussels or Washington or Sacramento?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the $10.5 trillion question.
Knuckles.
What strategies do you think are most effective out there? For our listeners navigating this day to day, how do you ensure you're not just compliant on paper, but genuinely resilient in practice? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a very complex but crucial area of data privacy and cybersecurity regulation. We hope this helps you continue to explore how these global trends impact your work in risk management.